The moment someone disrespects you and you say nothing, that silence can be louder than any scream. Because what looks like weakness in that moment might actually be the most dangerous form of strength in the room. We've been conditioned to believe that power is loud, that confidence argues back, that strength proves itself instantly. But real strength doesn't rush. Real confidence doesn't panic. And real power doesn't feel the need to perform. Silence is often misunderstood because we associate strength with noise. We assume that if someone is powerful, they must respond immediately, defend themselves publicly, and correct every slight in real time. But controlled silence is not passive, it is deliberate. When a woman chooses to stay quiet after disrespect, she is not surrendering her voice. She is exercising mastery over it. That distinction changes everything. Reacting instantly is emotional. Remaining composed is intentional. And intention always carries more authority than impulse. When someone disrespects you, they are often seeking a reaction, attention, validation, dominance. Something fuels that behavior. If you respond with visible anger or desperation, you give them exactly what they anticipated. The focus shifts from their action to your response. Suddenly, the conversation becomes about your tone, your emotion, your delivery. Silence disrupts that pattern. It removes the reward. It denies the aggressor control over the narrative. In that stillness, the energy in the room recalibrates. People notice who lost composure and who maintained it. Controlled silence also communicates self-assurance. It signals that your sense of worth does not depend on immediate public defense. You do not argue your value because you already know it. This doesn't mean you ignore boundaries forever. It means you choose the right time and method to enforce them. You respond strategically rather than emotionally. There is strength in knowing that you could speak, raise your voice, or retaliate, but deciding that the moment does not deserve that access to you. Silence, when chosen consciously, becomes a statement. It says you are observing, evaluating, and deciding your next move carefully. That restraint reflects discipline, emotional intelligence, and confidence. It transforms what others mistake for weakness into a quiet demonstration of power. Emotional regulation is the ability to feel everything without being controlled by anything. When disrespect happens, the first reaction is rarely logical. It is biological. The body tightens, the heart rate rises, the mind searches for defense. That surge of emotion is natural, but acting from it immediately often leads to outcomes that do not serve you. Emotional regulation creates space between what happens to you and how you respond. And in that space, power lives. When a woman regulates her emotions after being disrespected, she shifts from reaction to strategy. Instead of allowing someone else's behavior to dictate her state, she maintains ownership of it. That composure communicates stability. People instinctively respect those who remain grounded under pressure because it signals inner security. The person who is calm in chaos becomes the psychological anchor in the room. Meanwhile, the one who lashes out often loses credibility, even if they were right. Emotional regulation does not mean suppressing feelings. It means acknowledging them without letting them take control of your actions. Anger can inform you that a boundary has been crossed. Hurt can signal that something matters. But wisdom decides how and when those emotions are expressed. Timing becomes a strategic choice rather than an impulsive reaction. Addressing disrespect later in a calm and controlled manner often carries more impact because the message is clear, focused, and difficult to dismiss. There is also a deeper advantage. When you regulate your emotions, you prevent manipulation. Disrespectful behavior is frequently designed to provoke. If you refuse to be provoked, you deny the other person leverage. You maintain clarity while they reveal instability. Over time, this consistent composure builds influence. People trust those who can manage themselves. And self-management is the foundation of real authority, especially in moments where emotions could easily take over. Immediate reaction often benefits the person who initiated the disrespect because it shifts control into their hands. Disrespect is frequently intentional. It is designed to provoke, to test limits, or to gain attention. The moment you react without pause, you step into the script they created. Your anger, defensiveness, or raised voice becomes the centerpiece of the situation. Instead of their behavior being examined, your response is scrutinized. The focus quietly moves away from what they did and on to how you handled it. When someone reacts instantly, emotions are usually leading the response. Emotional reactions can be intense, and intensity is easy to manipulate. A disrespectful person may escalate, interrupt, deny, or twist your words because heightened emotion clouds clarity. In that state, it becomes harder to articulate boundaries effectively. It becomes easier for them to portray you as overreacting, sensitive, or unstable. That subtle shift weakens your position, even if your original grievance was valid. Immediate reaction also gives away information. It reveals exactly what triggers you and how strongly. Once someone knows they can provoke a visible reaction, they gain leverage. They may repeat the behavior because it produces the outcome they want. In contrast, when there is no immediate reaction, the pattern is disrupted. The aggressor is left uncertain. They cannot measure impact. That uncertainty creates discomfort, and discomfort reduces their sense of control. Pausing before responding preserves your strategic advantage. It allows you to assess intent, context, and consequence. It prevents you from saying something you might regret. More importantly, it keeps you in command of your narrative. When you choose if and when to respond, you reclaim authority over the situation. Delayed response is not avoidance, it is calculation. And calculation protects your dignity while denying the disrespectful person the reward of instant emotional access. Composure has a quiet authority that words often fail to achieve. When a woman remains calm after being disrespected, the dynamic in the room begins to shift almost immediately. Most people expect tension to escalate. They anticipate confrontation, raised voices, or visible frustration. When that reaction does not come, the emotional momentum stalls. The person who initiated the disrespect loses the rhythm they were counting on. Instead of controlling the atmosphere, they are left exposed within it. Human beings are highly responsive to emotional cues. In any interaction, people subconsciously look for signals about who is stable and who is unsettled. The one who appears grounded becomes the reference point. Composure signals security, self-control, and internal confidence. It communicates that your identity is not fragile enough to be shaken by a careless comment. That steadiness influences how others perceive both parties. Observers may begin to question the judgment or maturity of the disrespectful individual rather than the dignity of the one who stayed calm. There is also psychological weight in restraint. When someone expects retaliation and instead encounters silence or a measured expression, it creates tension. That tension invites self-awareness. The aggressor may start to feel the imbalance between their behavior and your response. In some cases, it forces them to confront the disproportion in their actions without you having to point it out. Composure also preserves credibility. Emotional outbursts can blur your message, but calm presence sharpens it. When you eventually choose to speak, if you choose to speak, your words carry more impact because they are not diluted by uncontrolled emotion. People listen differently when someone has demonstrated discipline under pressure. The room recognizes who maintained control and who lost it. Over time, this consistent steadiness strengthens your influence and subtly redefines the power structure in any environment where respect is tested. If you've ever realized later that your silence protected your dignity, I want you to reflect on that moment and carry it forward. Strength isn't always in what you say. Sometimes it's in what you refuse to say. Self-worth that depends on public defense is fragile because it relies on external validation to feel secure. When a woman feels compelled to immediately argue, justify, or prove herself after every instance of disrespect, it can signal that her value feels negotiable. True self-worth operates differently. It is internal, stable, and not easily shaken by someone else's opinion or behavior. When you deeply understand your value, you don't feel urgency to broadcast it. You don't rush to correct every misunderstanding or challenge every slight because your identity is not built on others' approval. Public defense often turns into performance. The focus becomes winning the moment rather than preserving dignity. In trying to prove yourself, you may over-explain, defend too intensely, or lower yourself to match the tone of the disrespect. That exchange subtly places your worth on trial, as if it requires validation from the very person who questioned it. When you refrain from that impulse, you communicate something powerful. Your value is not up for debate. This does not mean tolerating disrespect indefinitely. It means choosing the context and method of response carefully. Boundaries set calmly and privately often carry more weight than emotional rebuttals delivered in public. Addressing an issue with clarity rather than defensiveness shifts the conversation from proving yourself to correcting behavior. The difference is subtle but significant. One seeks approval, the other asserts standards. There is also strength in discernment. Not every comment deserves your energy. Some disrespect stems from insecurity, projection, or ignorance. Responding to all of it elevates it unnecessarily. When you refuse to engage at that level, you demonstrate that your self-perception remains intact regardless of external noise. Confidence that is rooted internally does not require applause, agreement, or immediate vindication. It remains steady even in silence, and that steadiness speaks more convincingly than any hurried defense ever could. Quiet responses create psychological discomfort for aggressors because they interrupt the pattern they rely on. Disrespect often carries an expectation attached to it. The person delivering it anticipates a reaction: anger, embarrassment, defensiveness, or retaliation. That reaction confirms their influence. It reassures them that their words had impact and that they can control the emotional temperature of the interaction. When the expected reaction does not arrive, the script collapses. Silence forces the aggressor into uncertainty. Instead of managing your emotions, they are suddenly confronted with their own behavior. Humans are wired to seek feedback in social exchanges. When feedback is absent, especially after a provocative action, it creates tension. They begin to question whether their comment was noticed, whether it landed, or whether it made them look immature. That internal questioning produces discomfort far more powerful than any argument you might have offered. There is also a shift in social perception. In many environments, observers watch how both parties respond. If one person remains composed while the other attempts to provoke, the contrast becomes obvious. The aggressor may feel exposed, as though a spotlight has quietly turned toward them. Without your emotional reaction to hide behind, their tone and intentions stand alone. That isolation can trigger self-awareness or, at the very least, self-consciousness. A quiet response also communicates boundaries without confrontation. It signals that access to your emotions is not easily granted. When someone realizes they cannot trigger you at will, their sense of control weakens. The power dynamic subtly reverses. Instead of you reacting to them, they begin reacting to your calm. Over time, this pattern discourages repeated disrespect because the anticipated reward never materializes. The discomfort created by silence becomes a deterrent, reinforcing that your emotional space is not open for manipulation or careless intrusion. Boundaries delivered calmly and intentionally carry more weight than those expressed in anger because they are rooted in clarity rather than emotion. When a woman responds to disrespect with immediate frustration, the message about the boundary can become overshadowed by tone. The other person may focus on how something was said instead of what was said. Anger can blur the issue and provide an easy distraction. In contrast, when a boundary is communicated with steadiness, it leaves little room for misinterpretation. The focus remains on the behavior and its consequences, not on emotional intensity. Calm boundaries signal self-respect. They communicate that you are not negotiating your standards, but you are also not losing control of yourself in the process. There is strength in stating clearly and without hostility what is acceptable and what is not. This approach reflects confidence because it shows you are secure enough to speak firmly without aggression. The absence of emotional volatility reinforces credibility. People are more likely to take a boundary seriously when it is delivered with composure rather than heat. Intentional boundaries also protect long-term influence. Explosive reactions may temporarily intimidate someone, but intimidation rarely builds respect. Calm assertion, however, establishes consistency. It shows that your standards are stable and not dependent on mood. Over time, this predictability shapes how others approach you. They learn that crossing certain lines will be addressed directly, but not dramatically. That balance of firmness and control creates an environment where respect becomes the norm rather than the exception. There is also empowerment in timing. Choosing when to address disrespect allows you to speak from a position of thoughtfulness. Instead of reacting to the moment, you respond to the principle involved. That distinction strengthens the boundary because it reflects intention rather than impulse, making your words harder to dismiss and your stance more enduring. Long-term influence is not built through volume. It is built through consistency of character. Loud reactions may win moments, but dignity wins reputations. When a woman chooses restraint after disrespect, she is investing in how she will be perceived over time rather than how she feels in a single exchange. Influence grows when people observe stability, not volatility. It strengthens when actions align with principles repeatedly, especially under pressure. Volume can command attention, but attention is not the same as respect. Attention is temporary and often emotional. Respect develops gradually through patterns of behavior that demonstrate self-control, discernment, and integrity. When someone handles disrespect with dignity, others notice the contrast. They see who maintained composure and who did not. That memory lingers far longer than the original comment. Over time, these moments accumulate and shape perception in powerful ways. Dignity also creates trust. People are drawn to those who do not crumble under criticism or lash out under provocation. They feel safer around individuals who manage themselves well. Safety is foundational to influence because it fosters credibility. When your reactions are measured and your response is thoughtful, your words carry greater authority. Others listen more closely because they recognize that you do not speak impulsively. There is also strategic strength in preserving your image. Once you lose composure publicly, it can be difficult to reclaim the narrative. Dignified silence or calm correction protects your long-term standing. It communicates that you are guided by standards rather than emotions. That steadiness builds a quiet reputation of strength. Influence rooted in dignity does not demand recognition. It earns it. It is not built in a single confrontation, but in repeated demonstrations of self-command. Over time, that pattern establishes a presence that speaks before you do and reinforces your authority without requiring raised voices or dramatic defense. Disrespect tests more than patience. It tests identity. In those moments, the instinct to react feels powerful, but the discipline to pause is even more powerful. Throughout this message, one truth remains consistent. Silence, when chosen intentionally, is not surrender. It is strategy. It is emotional regulation in action. It is self-worth that refuses to perform for approval. It is composure that shifts power quietly but decisively. Staying quiet after disrespect does not mean tolerating it forever. It means refusing to let someone else dictate your emotional state or control the narrative. It means understanding that immediate reactions often benefit the aggressor, while measured responses protect dignity. It means recognizing that calm boundaries carry more authority than heated arguments. It means knowing that influence is built over time through consistent character, not momentary volume. When a woman remains steady under pressure, she changes the dynamic. She denies manipulation. She preserves clarity. She demonstrates confidence without announcing it. And in doing so, she builds a reputation that speaks before she ever needs to. The real power was never in the reaction. It was always in the restraint.